Did you know that astrology books, which are not popular among Jews, astrology books have as their source Hebrew documents? Do you know why? Because of all the traditions of the ancient world, there is only one unbroken chain of tradition, and that's the Jewish tradition. From the time Abraham walked this world, 3,800 or so years ago, till today, there is an unbroken chain of relationships between teacher and students. And so even things that talk about astrology and the nature of the astrological charts and the astrological figures, the zodiac, the planets, all this information has only one unbroken chain, and that's the Jewish chain. And so the first thing you have to understand is that we have an unbroken chain. All of the traditions are broken. You take the Gospels, for example. The Gospels are filled with contradictions. There are no less than 1,000 different contradictions that have been identified. And, of course, there are people who try to answer these contradictions. But the truth is that the Gospels contradict each other. The events that the various witnesses saw, some saw them one way, some saw them the other way, some report one thing, some report something else. They're filled with holes and contradictions. The Torah is not that way. There are people who want to say that the Torah is written by several different hands. I present to you the words of Professor Adin Steinsaltz, who is known all over the world as one of the world's greatest geniuses and truthful people. They did a study on the book of Genesis where the Bible critics claimed that there were several hands sewn together into one document, but really there were several documents together. And they did an analysis of the writer who wrote the first part of Genesis, the middle part of Genesis, the end of Genesis, all throughout. And they discovered, to their shock and dismay, one hand wrote it. It's not several hands, it's not several edited versions put together, haphazardly, willy-nilly. And that answers some of the questions that you ask about when did we get the commandments for the covenant. You know, there was a professor, Wellhausen, who claimed that all of the stories of the Torah were fantasies. And then people began examining what the Torah says about the Jews when they were in Egypt, and discovered that the language, the customs, the descriptions of the homes, down to the very last detail, were exactly the way they were in ancient Egypt. In fact, a lot of the Hebrew has been influenced by their sojourn in Egypt. It's obvious that the people who wrote the Bible spent a large amount of time in Egypt. They once said that there were no records of the 5 kings who were attacked by the 4 kings, and that the 5 cities of the Dead Sea area were just figments of the writer's imagination. And then they discovered documents with the names of the kings and the towns exactly in the same order as is found in the Torah, in the Bible. They claimed that camels could not have existed in the time of Abraham, and that the story of Rebekah at the well was an anachronism because there were no camels. They insisted for over 100 years that there were no camels in the ancient world, in the Middle East, not domesticated anyway. And then they unearthed the city of Ugarit and discovered, to their shock and dismay, documents, bills of sales for camels. And these were contemporaneous with Abraham. The Torah seems to indicate that there was a pharaoh who ruled for an inordinately long period of time. Some say as long as 94 years. And such a pharaoh would have been well into his hundreds by the time he died. And so the Bible critics said, baloney, never happened. Then they discovered, guess what? A pharaoh who was king exactly 94 years, as the Torah said, because a new Pharaoh was inaugurated right before Moses came to the Egyptian capital to ask that the Israelites be let out. And so, that the Pharaoh was a king for 94 years, was predicted by the rabbis and by the traditions of the Jewish people for 3,300 years. And that this was poo-pooed and said to be ridiculous by your professors, by these great masters of science and sociology and history. But they were all liars, all cheaters. The ones that were making stuff up were the professors. And they discovered a Pharaoh who was king for 94 years. His son was a little behind because the Pharaoh apparently had only daughters, and his son was born to him late in life and was not physically a great specimen. And you can understand from this the whole story of the daughter of Pharaoh taking Moses into the palace. How is this possible? If the Israelites were so hated, how could the daughter of Pharaoh bring an Israelite boy into the palace and raise him as her own? Why would Pharaoh allow that? Well, there's an answer. He had no sons, only daughters. Whatever his daughter wanted, his daughter got. And there was always the thought that Moses would be the heir, exactly as you see on that movie, The Ten Commandments. There are other numerous citations. Kosher laws. Kosher laws state that only 4 types of animals chew their cuds and have split hoofs. Only 4 types of animals. There's only 4 types of animals that have one or the other, chewing their cud or having split hoofs. And these are the camel, the hare, the hyrax, and the pig. And since the Torah was given, they haven't found a different kind of an animal, one other species, that has only one of these 2 signs, either chewing the cud or having split hoofs. Having only one of the 2 signs. Only 4 types of animals have been discovered since the Torah was given. The language of the Torah is so precise. I wish I had time to show you just how precise the language of the Torah. But let me give you one thing to think about. What is the holiest number in the Torah? You don't know? I'll tell you. 7. Because every 7th day is the Shabbos. And we have 7 years for the Shemitah, for the year in which we don't plant and plow, and we give people back their freedoms from loans. And then we have the Jubilee year after 7 times 7, 49, the 50th year. But the holiest number is 7, because that's the word for oath, for swearing. You swear with the number 7. Sheva! I swear. That's what it means. 7 is the holiest number that we have in the Torah. In countless chapters of the Torah is written like a storybook. But within the details of those stories, each item is mentioned either 7 times or in multiples of 7. The heroes in each chapter and episode are mentioned either 7 times or in multiples of 7. And when they have to be mentioned at another time, they're mentioned in a totally different way. Key words are also mentioned exactly 7 times. Because you see, the author of the Torah had a precise code that everything had to follow a certain pattern. And then we get to the letters. The letters are altogether a totally different secret. We'll talk about that another time. I hinted at that when we talked about the Torah codes. But my friends, the Torah is a divine document. You can examine it yourself if you ever learned Hebrew. Unfortunately, you're all reading the King James Version, and you're all